have seen me around in the organization of the Congress. I have the pleasure to present two persons that didn't need to be presented really, so I think it will be just controlling the clock. You have all the information, as you know, in the agenda. So, and these two fellows, they are going to show us in an interactive way how learning, active learning, should be done in engineering education. So I will not take you more time. So you start, and I will stop you.
Okay.
The clock is there. Yeah?
Okay. You already have had a lot of opportunity to know who this is next to me. This is Michael Christie from the Sunshine University in Australia, and.
The University of the Sunshine Coast is a very serious university that attracts a large number of international students because of its own name. Fantastic. A lot from Sweden and Denmark and so on.
You make wonder why.
And I'd like to introduce, when we have the lights are going to go down, I guess at some point, I'd like to introduce a man who is well known in all three of the various conferences that are combined here, both in RRSPL, PAEE, and the simplest of all, ale. Okay?
I drink to that.
He drinks to that. We're a little bit of a team. Some of you have seen us before at other conferences, and I'm going to let Erik give you some context. This will be, in ale tradition, this will be an active session. So during it, you're going to be asked to give examples, your own examples, of when you activated learning, and we hope to build a little bit of a model and to answer some of the questions that were posed in the last keynote. We're very grateful to be actually towards the end of the day, because we've had a build-up of information that I think is really very essential for what we want to say and do. Erik.
Thank you, Michael. Getting started, but actually we're not just getting started today, because we are just continuing a roadshow that has been going on, this time for the third time in succession in an ale conference. We are giving this joint presentation, trying to get a grasp on the concept of active learning. We were first asked to do this in the ale in 2012 in Copenhagen. And we took up that challenge and we jumped right into the middle. We were talking about the philosophy of active learning. And we thought that by looking at the philosophy of active learning, we could enlarge our understanding. And I think we had a good run, but we did not really get out of it what we were expecting.
I think one of the most important things there was, and it's been reverberating during this conference, was that we spoke about Dewey and how we think. And I think that was very interesting because it's come back now in this conference on a number of occasions in a number of places.
Yes. We started out looking at this philosophical background of active learning, but then we realized if you really want to know something, you've got to do research. So that's how we continued. In 2014 in Brazil, we tried to look into research in active learning, trying to substantiate what makes it work, what doesn't make it work. And again, I think we had a very good active session where we're not asking people to sit on the floor and work with paper and build towers and other constructions, but we will ask you to interact with each other and not just listen to our wisdom that we collected in all those years. We think that the wisdom is among all of us. So we try to extract it from the group. We did that on research and active learning. And again, we found we haven't really got to the bottom of it. We may have started at the wrong end with the philosophy, because now we know before we can really dive into active learning, we have to figure out what is the meaning of active learning. What are people really considering to be active learning in their own practice?
I think it's very interesting for me, when I think of active learning as an English speaker, I think it's a tautology. I think it's like saying a male man or a female woman.
Yeah.
Because you cannot learn without being active. But of course, conceptually that is true. But in terms of process, then when you start looking at that that, then we can, I think, start to define how you can activate learning.
Yes, I've seen examples of active learning where actually the students were sitting in rows in a sort of auditorium, like here, and the teacher was running up and down the area here in the front. So he was very active, and he considered that to be active learning. So yeah, you have different interpretations of this whole concept, and we will try to explore that.
We are going to explore it, and we'll be exploring it. As I said, I'm going to repeat it a few times so that you have a chance to think of an example. We're going to be exploring it by getting you in groups of 3 or 4 or 2, if there's only 2 of you there, to actually come up with an example that, or an incident where you have activated learning, and then later on we're going to ask some of you to say, how did you do that? Why did you do it? How did you do it? But I'm going to begin, first of all, with a story. And it's a story in a sense of my accidentally activating learning. But it had a lot of repercussions, because on reflection, I think I've maybe in my own mind, in my own personal way, developed a model of active learning. In 2001, I was a guest lecturer at the University of Stockholm. I was teaching in the English department there, same year as my son was born. And it was winter, January. It was a similar sort of time as you saw in the slides from Holland. There had been snow, there was a lot of snow on the ground. I could, if I wanted, walk straight out of my flat on Professor Slingen. They named all of this little area after various names, Professor Dossenbacken and so on. Instead of going over the road and straight to the university, I took a big semicircular swing through the forest. And as I was going through there, walking, I noticed out of the corner of my eye a woman standing off the track a little bit into the forest in front of a tree. It was a very nerve-wracking time in Sweden in that month and around that time, because there was a murderer, a killer called the Laser Man. The media dubbed him as the Laser Man. And he was killing migrants. He killed about 3, I think, and he shot at about 4. I missed being shot at by about half an hour when I look at the time that he did try to shoot someone on the university grounds. So I was very nervous not to frighten this woman, and it was snow-covered, so I could move very quietly. But as I came almost at right angles to her, I saw her embrace the tree, hug the tree in front of her. I kept going. She didn't know that I'd been past. I kept going. And when I got to the university where I'd been teaching English, and where I had a real problem with getting my wonderful Swedish students to speak English in class. They could write it brilliantly. They learned it from a very young age. They knew the grammar. They were good. They understood everything I said. But they weren't listening. They weren't speaking. They weren't practicing it. So when I came in, instead of my usual thing, I said, there was a strange thing happened to me on the way to class this morning, and I told them the story that I've just told you. It was chaos. Everybody started asking questions and speculating. What do you mean when you say she hugged the tree? She hugged it. Why did she hug the tree? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think she hugged the tree? What did she look like? Well, I said, well, she had long black hair right down, down her back. Well, maybe she was Asian, Perhaps she was a Buddhist, It was, and so there was all of this discussion back and forth, and I just sort of sat back and thought, wow, the power of a story, the power of the story. And so since that time, I have encouraged the people that I've been helping in engineering educators. I've been taking them for courses. I tell them, look, exactly as you said earlier on, yes, we'll never fit all the content in. But if you're teaching differential equations, tell the story of the guy who came up with them. If you're teaching something else, tell the story. Give them the human person behind it. Sometimes these guys are thinking up these things in their dreams. They're coming to them in dreams. Fantastic stories. At least you'll get their attention. So this comes to the part where we activate a little bit of teaching and learning. You'll see up there, I had a problem to solve here. I put it in Spanish on the right-hand side. Of course, I went to Google Scholar and I knew that wasn't Google Translate, knew that wouldn't work. So I took it to the reception at the hotel where I was staying. So please be kind. He was so nice, the guy who helped me put it into a bit better order. Maybe it's wrong, but I hope you understand it. So this is your moment now to turn to someone nearby you and to give an example. We had fantastic examples on the first day of this conference where Don and people activated learning in the workshops and hands-on. We want you now to take as much time as you need to give an example of when you activated learning, explain to your companions in 3s or 4s how and why it worked. We want successful examples. And be ready to share the group's best example. My colleague here will take hand of that. So off you go.
Well, one last comment. If you talk about a best practice, I think what you need to look into is what you define as best. What do you define as successful? So if you are starting with these examples and you're sharing them with each other, make clear to each other what is the characteristic that makes it a good example, what are the attributes that makes it successful.
Okay. So those that are perhaps a little bit further or stuck on the side, can you come in please and join someone else? In 3s, 2s, 3s and 4s, that would be good.
3s and 4s will be good, so you have a few different experiences to share.
Okay.
And rather than moving all to the middle, you can also a little bit move to the outside of the room. So you have a little bit of privacy with your group. With as much time as you need, Mark will say when it is really enough.
10 minutes maximum. We'll start with 5-10 minutes and then we'll see how we go. Take turns to give an example of when you activated learning, explain how and why it works, and be ready to share the group's best examples.
What about you? Okay, I wasn't very bad. I'm not native.
It's from 3 to 4 exercises. Ask you to consider, would it be okay if we have, let's say, 5 more minutes? But then in the group, you make sure that everyone really had the turn to say something and to get comments from the other. So in 5 minutes time, we ask you to wrap up and then we start sharing some of the experiences.
Well,
okay?
we're going to actually share a best example from a group, for example. We won't get around all the groups, but you'll get a taste of what the groups are doing. So no more than 5 minutes, and then we will start to ask people, okay, can you give us your best example, please? And okay, that's the story.
Here's a carrot.
Okay, Erik, you're on.
Okay, guys. Now it's really time to wrap up. To break up the groups for now, to separate a little bit. If someone was turned with the back to the front of the theater, please turn back.
So we don't have a lot of time, but we're going to hear some of the examples, and it's rather wonderful. People have said to me as I've gone around, look, we've got, how can we do this? How can we choose the best? We've got 4 best, or we've got 4 different. So in your response, we're really interested in how and why it worked. So that those who had maybe 3 good examples will talk about the common elements in those examples that made active learning work, that activated learning. Off you go. You're going to take some...
I'm going to ask who is coming, and we need one of these microphones. Yes, they are there. You can go into the room, and see someone raise their hands who would like to?
Yeah, up
yes,
the back
it's in
here.
the back. Of course, it's in the back, so you have to run all the way up.
That's
It was foreseen.
good. Okay, so try to keep it short so we hear more from more groups. But yeah, short, concise, effective.
But take your time, Andy.
This is the trouble working in a
There we
team.
go, now it's working. You heard from me before, I'm Andy from Lawrence Tech University in the US.
Do you want to come to the front?
No, I'm not gonna do. I'm gonna actually start with a question. We noticed that you kept mentioning, both of you, activating your learning as opposed to just saying active learning.
Yeah.
And so we got into the discussion, our group was the four of us here, so we got into the discussion of, do you actually, is there a difference? Because Erik, you had a great example. You're like, one professor thought just pacing back and forth across the front of the room was active learning. But then, Michael, you told a different story and said just by telling a story, the students started asking questions, which didn't necessarily mean that they were building something or making posters or presenting. It could even be just thinking to themselves. So first, just a quick question, and then I can throw out our example back here. And that is, are you considering a difference between what we've been calling active learning and activating your learning?
Yeah, we put the question as, when did you activate learning? Our whole point is that if you give us lots of examples, and we're here for a number of examples, we might see some common elements in the process of activating learning. If you've activated learning, then they should be learning actively. That's my assumption, but it could be wrong.
We actually made the same observation. If you listen to people talking about active learning, some of them are talking about a kind of exercise where students are, creating something with their hands, building something, really designing something. And there are other forms of active learning where
And then we're going to
students
hear
are
from
still
you about them.
talking, where it's more oral. So there are different interpretations. And the whole purpose of this presentation is trying to get more grasp on the variety of interpretations.
Okay, so let's hear them.
Okay, so what we saw as a common element with the four of ours as we were going around is that they all had what I refer to as a hook, like a fish hook, where it really grabs the students to the point where they forget their learning. They're so interested in the problem that they just want to keep working on it, they want to keep tackling it. And what we found out then is that by the end of those, whatever the lesson they were learning, that they often say that this was the easiest course I ever took. This is the easiest class I ever had. Because they didn't realize they were learning, they were immersed in it, they loved it. So we sometimes like to use the word more immersive experience sometimes than even in active learning. And it's because of that hook.
Can you describe this fish hook to me?
Grabs a hold of the student so hard that they can't let go of the problem to tackle it. So
Yeah.
one of the examples we had from computers was they were supposed to be learning some certain aspects of computer hardware, and they just didn't want to go through the book. But as soon as they saw that there was an application, they started taking the computer apart. And the next thing they knew is they found these elements in there. They didn't know what they were, they didn't know how they worked, and they just wanted to keep digging deeper and deeper. And eventually they learned everything they needed to know. By the end of the semester, they thought it was the easiest class they'd ever taken.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from another group, please. There's one in the front here.
Thank you very much. I am Hurtado from IJCLEE School of Engineering from Tunisia. So 3 years ago, we began with the experience of active learning and applying the PBL, problem-based learning. And with this experience, we have a lot of problems in applying it, and we have a lot of complaints from our students about our teacher, but mainly on facilitating. Now they say that the teacher is the classroom, and anytime we ask them questions, they say to me, find on Google, we are an active learner, you are an active learner, you must find it by yourself. So we have a lot of, and an assessment also. They feel that the assessment is not got affected. It's based on observation, and they say, I am working on the team, I am the first one who do this job, but I have a bad graduate. And we have a lot of complaints about that. So my problem, I am the Dean of Education. My problem, how to contact, how to communicate all these complaints to our teachers. So I have the choice to have a meeting like that and to say to them, this is the list of the complaints and this is what you must do to correct these complaints. Or so I invite them to a meeting, I put them in groups, many groups, and I give them all the complaints. And I say to them, this is the complaints, you can study them, you can class them, and give me solution about how to do to resolve all these complaints. And when they try, for example, to work, let's say half an hour, and after I ask each member of a group to go like a jigsaw, to go with other members of the group and to discuss the same thing. He will reflect and he will transmit all the discussion of the first group, and after 1 hour they come back to the original group and to make a synthesis. After we make a synthesis of all the complaints, of all the recommendations, and they say to them, now the administration asks you to apply your recommendations.
Great example. May I ask someone from that group? You have listened to this example, you have commented on him. Can you share some of the comments you gave to Lampion when he told this great example of activing?
We're always disagreeing. I want to get on and hear more examples, and he wants to drag it out. We're running short of time, so if you don't have anything big you want to...
Yeah, no, we really loved his example because he solved a problem, giving the problem to his students, and it was top 10.
Thank you for being so concise, Val. Now we can take something from another group.
We don't have time for all, so it is who really wants it, they can start sharing first.
Hello, Neil Clark from Dublin Institute of Technology again. Really here we have the general theme of making it real for the students. So giving them an example that was in the news or something that was on television or something like that, or something that was relevant to them. And so Enrique described the time he introduced them to an article that said, drinking beer actually makes you lose weight. So your body having to warm up the beer will burn more calories than is actually contained in the beer, which involved, analysing, looking for calorific values of beers, looking at heat transfer, convection, conduction and radiation possibly, and also all these branches of science. So we've copyrighted a new subject to be called beerodynamics. So nobody's to use that. That's all right.
That's really new for me. I was aware that if you drink wine, you have less chance of breaking a leg if you go skiing. But this advantage of beer is new to me.
The critical point of this was that the calculation done was actually it was actually calories, not kilocalories they used. So the actual calculation was out by a factor of 1,000. So the news was not good.
Yeah, thank you. I've just spoken to the moderator. I got told off about doing it, which was quite appropriate. And we normally would keep 15 minutes for questions, but